On this episode of Around the Outside, a very special interview with a very special person. Thank you to all our fans from around the world for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
You're listening to Around the Outside, the American Formula One podcast with your hosts Ian Shea and Mike DuPont.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Around the Outside, the American Formula One podcast. This is Ian Shea, and we have a very special episode for you tonight because we have a very special guest in the studio. I'm sure all of you have seen at least one of his videos on Instagram and TikTok. Please allow me to introduce James Coker. James.
Hey there, Ian. Super excited to be here. I got to say, I listened to y'all's most recent episode last night while I was working out, getting swole, and loved it. Big fan. I just love, Ian, I love how much of and I say this like in the most complimentary way possible, I love how much of a nerd you are for racing. The most subtle nuances in a race bring you so much delight and joy. It's great. It's very enjoyable to listen to, and it made me very happy.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the compliment. And if you listen to us working out, I could put on more of a David Goggins sort of tone if need be to get you motivated. I'll throw out who's got to move those boots.
There was a part where you were talking about the collision that happened in Canada with Nick DeVries and Kevin Magnussen, and you were laughing at the way DeVries braked into the corner, and it reminded me of the scene from Billy Madison, where he's in class and Robert Schmeigel is the science teacher, and he's laughing at himself going, and this does not make the ribosomes happy. Yeah. And I'm like, that's exactly what Ian Shea's like. Ian will just be thinking about some moment that happened in a race that nobody else noticed, and you think it's the funniest thing in the world.
Well, thank you so much. I do get excited over tenths of a second sometimes when it's P15 and 16 and they're getting no airtime, because I just think that's where the a lot of the action is happening, because sometimes I get a little tired of hearing about Max Verstappen and Alonso. Is great as they are. I like to look at the 18 other dudes that are
100%
driving out there. But what I just am so happy that you are on this show because, sir, you have had such a surge of success over on social media. And from what I've gathered, Formula One hasn't been an everlasting sport in your life. Am I correct in thinking that, or?
Oh, 100%. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I didn't know anything about Formula One 6 months ago.
Wow. No, it seems like you've been watching Formula One for years. And what I love is your fresh take and your fresh perspective that you bring. Because what I liked is how you were comparing to Formula One teams to baseball teams, or Formula One teams to NBA teams. That's something my brain just will not do. And I think that what you're giving the fans, giving us, is just another way to look at the sport. And what was it 6 months ago about Formula One that you were just enthralled with, that you had to really bring it out to the people?
Well, like Beauty and the Beast, my intro to Formula One, tale as old as time, was Drive to Survive. So many people's entry into the sport in the last few years. My wife and I decided to binge it on Netflix. We got into it very fast, and I think we binged all 5 seasons in a matter of a couple weeks.
Who doesn't?
But yeah, right. But it was it's funny because we were watching the last season as this current season was starting, and I refused to read any news about it because I did not want any spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was watching the show, but I had no idea what was going on in the actual world of Formula One. And so finally, once we finished the show, I started following it. And the first race I ever watched was the Australian Grand Prix this year.
That's incredible. That's amazing. So what was your first experience then? What was it like watching? And that was an outrageous race to be your first one, by the way. So congratulations.
It was wild. I also like, you know, I don't feel like Drive to Survive did a great job just showing how exciting qualifying is. Like, I don't think they ever totally explained the Q3, Q3 to Q1, Q2 through Q2, Q3 with elimination zones.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me how long they've had that format? I found it very exciting.
They have had that format, and this is a very around the outside specific time frame for a hot minute, because I don't know the actual time frame that it's been going on like that. But I think that qualifying is something that they really should be showing more of, because that is the only time, in my opinion, Q3 with 2 minutes to go, the fastest that you'll ever see one of those cars. And I encourage you to, I forget what year the Mercedes W11 was, but pre Silverstone. Silverstone was watch the Silverstone quali for the W11, because that's the last time party mode was ever allowed. Dude, the speed on that Mercedes, now that you've seen quali in this era of Formula One car, you're just going to see the way this car just vibrates. It's the craziest thing you'll ever see, but it is the fastest thing on four wheels. And I think that Internet
says 2020 for the W11.
Oh man, that's a shame. That was a short season too. We got robbed for that.
Yeah, first win was the Austrian Grand Prix. Last win, Bahrain.
Yeah. No, that car was a tank. Yeah, but if you go to Silverstone, you'll know what I'm talking about. And watching the sport now versus Drive to Survive, has any opinions on teams, drivers, tracks changed? Did you have loyalties to one and now you're finding loyalties to another?
I think, they credit to that show. They did a very good job sort of like crafting a narrative around individual teams and drivers. But also what made it confusing at times was how it isn't chronological and it jumps around in the season a lot. And often you will see the same race featured with, you'll see the same race featured in different episodes. So you'll see there'll be some overlap and it could feel redundant. But I've said this in other podcasts and had this conversation many times, but Jenny and I were really drawn to drivers that come from more humble beginnings.
Me too.
Because Formula One has always been a sport about, privilege and class.
Yep.
Like you have to have a lot of money to be able to run any of these teams. And the majority of the drivers that you see are people that come from immense wealth, because like karting is, I assume, is a very expensive sport.
Yeah.
And not only the expense of having the machinery, having a parent who is available to travel their child all over the country, all over the world, at any given time to be able to compete in these competitions. Like you have to, for the most part, be well off. So to see people like Hamilton, to see people like Checo, to see people like Esteban Ocon, to see Albon, who came from humble beginnings and overcame adversity and still made it to Formula One. Like forget the fact of any of the individual successes they had while in Formula One. The fact that they're there at all is a miracle. So those are the drivers that I tend to root for over anyone. In teams, it bounces back and forth. I feel like I didn't want to arbitrarily pick a favorite team. I feel like over the years, eventually one will call to me and I'll feel an affection for one over another. But more than anything, I want parity in the sport. That's what I really root for. As opposed to, which probably will never happen, but as opposed to cheering for like one team to have success. Like I want it to be a little more competitive.
I do too. And I have allegiances to Williams, McLaren, Alpine. Like those are I can't choose. I know exactly what you're talking about. And with the disparity that we're seeing in the sport currently, with the lead that Max Verstappen has and Red Bull to the rest of the field, yes, other teams have been closing the gap, but do you have any suggestions, or do you think there are any rules or ways to try and close the gap? Because there's a history of one team just dominating ever since, honestly, 2010 Red Bull. It's been Red Bull, Mercedes, and now it's Red Bull again.
Right. I know that there was like this golden era, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was this golden era of Formula One driving in like the 80s when you had like so many drivers who were so good competing at each other. Mm-hmm. You had like Senna, you had Prost, you had
Lauda was in there.
Out here. Lauda. Like you had so many drivers who like were capable of winning the world championship. And I don't know if you could say the same right now. But when it comes to like the Constructors Championship, like you look from like, I was having this conversation on another podcast, like from 75 to like 2004 or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but it was like a 30, 35, 40 year span, with the exception of 1 year when Benetton won the Constructors Championship. Mm-hmm. All the Constructors Championships were won by either McLaren, Williams, or Ferrari. Yeah. So like for the most part, there has never been parity in the sport, and this sport Formula One has never been about parity. So it's hard to make radical changes that I feel like would turn the sport into something that it never was. Mm-hmm. But I am all for doing some rule changes that will level the playing field somewhat. I like the cost cap. I like that we're starting to see more talent, for instance, like that Red Bull can no longer afford because of the cost cap that are getting poached by McLaren and other teams. Mm-hmm. It's very possible that over the next few years, we'll start seeing little improvements on cars in the next few years, and maybe that'll even things out. I also like this idea, and I hate to plug another podcast on this podcast, but I have to give these guys the credit because it wasn't my idea. I was listening to Red Flags last week, and they were talking about how, as everyone listening knows, the higher up you finish in the constructors standings, the more money you get. They made the argument there should be also a sliding scale where the lower you finish, you have a slightly higher cap for the next year.
That's okay. I never thought of that. Yeah.
I kind of like that idea. I don't think it should be so significant that it would incentivize teams to tank, so that they had more money to spend. But I do like the idea if like Williams finishes 10th in the standings, they have $15 million or $20 million more to spend the next year.
That's a very good idea. I think Formula One is trying to do something like that without the fiscal responsibility put onto the teams with the wind tunnel allotment, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, we saw Haas, they were able to do a little something with it early on into 21. And they also had this little tiny winglet that in the first of the season, which is actually being reproduced on other vehicles now. And I like how, I like how they're taking the aerodynamic route, because with the, my personal opinion on it is if it's 135 million, it's 135 million, because the whole reason for it was, they were a team, I think Haas had, could only accrue like 80 million in the years of pre-cost cap, and Mercedes was at $500 million. So
sure, yeah,
the cost cap is a great step. And do you find, because you're just so creative with your content, like when you're in a shopping cart, how does that come to, like, how did you even think of doing anything like that? It's just so creative.
I think a lot of it comes from, thank you, by the way.
Of course.
I think a lot of it comes from just the original video that I think first started getting some traction online. It started with Jenny and I in the car. My wife, Jenny, we were driving and she was like pretending she was the race engineer. And she was like pretending like we were doing radio chatter, like push, box, question, like that kind of stuff, confirm. And I was like, oh, this is kind of funny. Why don't you film me driving and we'll do this? And I put it online and I didn't think anything of it. And,
yep.
I would go back and forth, but I would cut back and forth between me driving and onboard footage of the Prius. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think of anything of it. And it like blew up both on Instagram and TikTok. And I was like, okay, I have some more footage from this. Let me cut a couple more versions. And I cut like 3 more and those all did well. And I was like, okay, I guess people really like Formula One, like comedy content. And so I come from an improv background. I did improv and sketch comedy for over a decade in New York. So
okay.
I'm thinking like, if this is true, what else is true? Like I've been a comedian for like over 10 years. But I was thinking, if this is true, what else is true? What else can I do? So then I think I made if F1 drivers were Mario Kart characters, which is like a fun, dumb video. And a lot of old school fans hated it.
Yeah, whatever.
Like a lot of old school fans hate my videos, and that's fine. I get a lot of hate in the comments, but I want to say I'm used to it, but you never get used to it. But so I just started thinking of different things. Like I did some impressions, and I've continued to do a few impressions here and there. I'm hesitant to do impressions because Connor Moore is so good.
Yep.
And I've never been that great at impressions, and he's amazing at it. So like I never wanted to lean too hard into like doing something like that. So I just sort of like dabble in a bunch of different things. I'll try like a new video. Like I did like a video last week that was sort of in the style of Formula Bone, who I love Jay Bone. I don't know if you follow him.
No, I don't.
He's amazing. Nope. Oh, this guy Formula Bone is like so good. He's a Formula One content creator who makes videos in a race car bed.
Yeah. And like Step Brothers race car bed. Oh no. What movie is that? Yeah. Grandma's Boy. Excuse me. I don't.
Yes. And he has like a huge following on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. And he makes videos with his brother, who he calls Producer Jeff. And a lot of his videos are more straightforward. He'll talk about like a moment in history of Formula One. In Formula One, like he'll talk about a Grand Prix that happened in like the 1970s. Mm-hmm. And then he'll also do like race predictions, and then do like a 60-second race review of a recent Grand Prix. He's funny. He's like, a very funny, sweet nerd that like wears a race suit in his race car bed. He's a grown ass man, but he's great. But like, I tried to do something very similar to him. Like I wasn't trying to copy him outright, but like I was doing research about the Canadian Grand Prix, and I looked at all the years, and I noticed that there were a few years that the Canadian Grand Prix didn't happen. And like I think it was 1987. I was like, that was weird. So I clicked on it, and I found out the reason the 1987 Grand Prix never happened was there was a dispute over beer sponsorships. Like one race promoter had signed a deal with Molson, but the Circuit de Villeneuve had a contract with Labatt.
Okay.
And so it went to court, and Bernie Ecclestone eventually got so tired of it, he was like, I'm just going to drop it from the calendar this year. And so they just didn't have the race. So I made a video about that, and I made sure that like Formula Bone and no one else had like made that video before. So I'm just constantly trying different styles and different forms, and like seeing what works and seeing what people like. I think the videos that people like the most are the impressions or something that's super current, like me reacting immediately to like something that's happening sort of in the Formula One pop culture space. Like, when the Fernando Alonso and Taylor Swift rumors came out, I made a Taylor Swift song about, and weaved in Formula One lyrics. And with the Shakira and the Lewis Hamilton ones, I did like a Shakira song, but like weaved in Formula One stuff. So I don't know. A lot of it is just sort of like inspiration in the moment. And I just like try to immediately write it out and make it that day. So before sort of like the inspiration and the idea goes away.
Well, I honestly love what you're doing for the community and for the sport, because earlier you said that, the old school gatekeepers it's a terrifying word to use, but like almost purists of Formula One. And I think that if you don't accept different perceptions or even differences of change, because Formula One, in my opinion, is always about change. Just look at the evolution of vehicle. And I also believe that Formula One has something for everybody. And James, I just keep pushing the content, and I'm going to use the First Amendment here. Fuck the haters, because you are making so many people happy, and you're making so many people smile with what you're doing. And I just love how you're able to take the experience you've had from improv and bring it into such a rigid billionaires boys club. It is awesome. And I know I'm going to gush and congratulate throughout this podcast to you, but that's what I'm going to do. And
thanks, man.
Throughout this era, because you've seen the changes over in Drive to Survive, which I think does a wonderful job in giving insights into the world of Formula One and even into the vehicles of Formula One. Do you think there's going to be, I'm trying to think of the words of how to say this era, of Formula One with the ground effect cars, do you think that's going to be everlasting, or would you want to see them go back towards like a 2018 spec vehicle?
You know what? I don't think I understand the specificity. Like, I don't understand the sport enough to understand the question you just asked me.
So what it was, the big change for the 2021 or 2022 is that like a majority of the downforce of the Formula One car is coming off of the floor, which means that from the rear wing, instead of the air traveling like over and down onto the other vehicles, making it harder for them to travel closer, this ground effect is supposed to disperse it up. So it's supposed to bring the racing closer. Now, having watched this season so far, do you feel as if they are racing closer, or do you think that it's just like there could be more overtaking with what we're watching?
I don't think we're seeing that much overtaking.
No.
I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not. Like I think there are, if you look at the standings, that's essentially where the cars more or less are in a race and on the grid. And I know there's disparity within teams. Like you have the disparity between Alonso and Stroll. You have the disparity between Max and Checo. But for the most part, you look at a race, and I think the Canadian Grand Prix is a great example of that. You have Max just like racing his own race, super far out. And like, I know he was only like a 10-second, he only won by 10 seconds in Canada, but prior to that, he was winning by 30 seconds in most of his races. And then you have like the next tier, which is for the most part, Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston Martin. They are close-ish with each other. And then everybody else, I feel like, is bunched up. So it's like, we're seeing like a race for one, which is like Max in his own world. We're seeing the race for two, and then we're seeing a race for five. Right. So I do think they're bunched up. And like you guys were talking about in your last episode with Albon defending P7, he had essentially like a DRS train of like 5 cars following the entire time. It was like an old guy with a big wide walker walking on a narrow sidewalk, and a bunch of people like are late to work and they're trying to get by and they just can't. You know,
it's way too awkward to pass, and you think you're going to break the guy's hip. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Being from New England, and you have that New York vibe, you understand the need to get someplace. Oh, okay. With your content, I don't mean to. I just got so excited about this era of Formula One car and talking to you, but with the content that you create and with the circus.
One thing about the car, though, before we go to that, one thing about the car, I think the cars are too big.
Thank you.
Like,
yes.
So I think that's one of the biggest issues. Like the cars have evolved, but the tracks have not. So all of the tracks, for the most part, are built for cars that were racing 40 years ago that are like half as wide as the current ones. So I think that's one of the reasons why you're not seeing the overtaking that you might have seen in the past. I can't attest that there was more overtaking in the past. You could probably tell me, but they're too big, especially on a track like Monaco. If they're going to be racing in Monaco, they should all go in like fucking go-karts or something like that, because Monaco is too small to have a race with cars that big, unless it's just going to be like the quali is the real race and the grid is just like a ceremony. The actual race Grand Prix is like a ceremony.
It is,
to celebrate how well people did in quali.
It is. That's what I love about Monaco, because it's the best parade you'll ever see ever on television. Yeah. But no, you sir, are spot on with making the cars smaller. The 2004, if you just look at the 2004 cars, they were like, a V10, 750 kilograms, whatever many pounds that is. And that's fun to watch them. It's the overtaking has always been an issue for as long as there's been Formula One, but smaller cars, 100% with you. And to backtrack, the content that you create and the circus that is Formula One, does it just write a script for you? You just kind of lean back and look at the news and go, oh, no way.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like, at the beginning of the week, I'll be like, all right, what kind of ideas do I have? And I'll have some ideas that I think I'm not super excited about. And then something will happen in the news that you can immediately react to. Like when they announced they were making that movie with Brad Pitt, I'm like, all right, let's like see what that looks like. I did a bad Brad Pitt impression pretending to be him in a Formula One movie, eating throughout the entire scene, because that's what Brad Pitt does.
Every single movie he's ever done, yes.
Yeah, he loves to eat. And then like same like with the Ryan Reynolds news, like Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney buying or investing in a 24% stake in Alpine. I was like, all right, let's do a bad Ryan Reynolds impression and map it in with some Formula One specifics. So often when stuff like that happens, it's like really easy to just come up with an idea. Stuff writes itself and so forth.
Have you ever?
I think sorry. Go
have
ahead.
you ever toyed with, and because I haven't seen anything recently, have you ever toyed with Helmut Marko and Nick DeVries and Christian Horner, that trifecta?
I haven't. That's an interesting one, because DeVries isn't a Red Bull Academy product, right?
He's off the street.
He was just like, was he Formula E before this?
Yeah, he was a Formula E champion, and then he did a few, testing for, 5 different teams, ran for Williams at Monza last year. So it was odd to not have someone from the junior program come up.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that much. Horner's an interesting guy. He he always looks short compared to Toto, but I don't know how tall he actually is, but he definitely feels like, and I like all the team principles. I have nothing against Christian Horner, but he does feel like he has like a Napoleon complex in a way, especially when he's interacting with Toto.
Big time.
Which I feel like is so interesting, because he acts like he has this chip on his shoulder, but he's successful. Like, I'm like, why? I don't understand why he's so ornery. Like, you got everything you wanted. You live this charm life, like in the English countryside with ginger spice, riding horses, like having barbecues where you cook unseasoned meat. And like you're the team principal for one of the most successful Formula One programs in history that 20 years from now they might have more constructor titles than Ferrari. We don't know. But like he's winning, and he always acts like his he's in a corner or his backs up against the wall. You know what I mean?
We have a running joke on this podcast that Red Bull is just a subsidiary of an energy drinks company, and they're always number 2, no matter how many world champions. That man does an incredible job of downplaying the success and making people almost feel bad for him. So that way, when they win, you're like, yeah, the underdog who's been dominant for years has finally done it.
I mean, it very well might be just like a managerial tactic to sort of keep people inspired and keep people not getting, making sure people don't get complacent. Cause I don't know exactly what led to Mercedes dipping off and Red Bull sort of swapping places with them that came to the dominance. I know a lot of people credit Adrian Newey's designs on the car, but it's very possible that at Mercedes, after winning, 8 constructors championships in a row, they got complacent. And I think that happens when you win that much, so maybe Horner's managerial style is to do whatever he can to avoid that and act like they are always the underdog, even though they are the New England Patriots on steroids.
No, that's Yes. No, I know. And what about Gunther Steiner? Does he what's your perspective on Gunther Steiner? Because I hold my own, and I think that he's a very harsh manager, and I'm not his biggest fan. And when I hear I love him, this is what is it? Change my perspective. What is it about him that you love?
I think it's his personality. I can't speak to his managerial style enough other than what I see on the show.
Yeah.
What I don't understand about Gunther Steiner is how they were so successful in what year was it? 2018?
Yes.
Where they got 4th place?
Yes.
I don't understand how they went from being so successful that year and then dropping off so quickly. Like, what changed between those years? So I know he's a fan favorite. People love his personality, but I think his personality and his popularity from that show is what has kept his job security. I'm such a big fan of him. I love him a lot, but I feel like if anybody else had been in his position, just looking at performance alone, they would have been gone. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, from what you have observed and read, is he a pretty hard team principal?
Well, I just I can remember because of Drive to Survive, I have this opinion of him. He was, when they were trying to figure out, was it 2019, the difference in cars, and they had to go to different chassis. And when they're halfway through the season, Roman Grosjean got the Australian first race of the season chassis. And instead of encouraging the team to come find a solution, come together, he was saying, they're going to fucking do this or I'm going to fucking sack somebody. That's what I didn't like, how there was already a divide and it seemed like he was the hammer pushing the nail even further instead of trying to pull it out. But I like and agree with you that it's his personality and his marketability, which has kept him on the team for so long.
100%. I think, but I will say he probably has the toughest job out of any of the team principals. I think he's working with less than anyone else. Like, I know Williams, recently, James Vowles appealed to F1 and the FIA saying we need more money because our technology is like 20 years behind everyone else's. But I feel like Haas is working with less. And so I can't imagine the amount of pressure that Steiner is under day in, day out. I think it's hard. So I don't know.
Yeah, see, there's that element that I know I brush off a little too easily on him and don't give him enough credit to deal with, because he has to call Gene Haas. Like, the guy's name is on the car and you've got to call him after a bad race. I wouldn't want to be him, and I'm sure a few people would want to be him.
Yeah. I think he just has to do things that other team principals don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many team principals have to go out and sell themselves to sponsors the way he does. Like, you know, I imagine a lot of the other Formula One teams have entire departments that drum up that sort of business.
Yeah.
And, you know, they, like, Toto Wolff probably never has to go into a room and, like, give a PowerPoint presentation on why someone should throw their logo on the halo of the Mercedes livery. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Toto got invited to, he's like an intern professor or like whatever the term is at Harvard, at the Harvard School of Business there, just for being Toto Wolff.
Right.
We talked briefly about the old school fans and their opinions on just Formula One as a whole. I think is just garbage, because we got to change. With the introduction of like Miami and Las Vegas, these like new races, this new flash coming into Formula One, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like there's too much of a focus on the glitz and glamour and not the racing?
I think Formula One, to a degree, has always been about the glitz and glamour.
Mm-hmm.
It has been about the celebrities and the models. And at certain races and certain circuits, it's been about, to a degree, it's been about the scene that makes it so sexy and exciting and appealing. However, I do feel like it gets to a point where it feels very silly.
Yes.
And such a far departure from what makes the sport great. It could turn off anybody. There's a great content creator on TikTok and Instagram named, I don't know his real name, but his account's called Break Hard. And he talked about how 20 years ago, NASCAR had a similar thing where it had a surge in global popularity, and it started this chase for the casual fan. And in focusing so much and bringing in casual fans, they forgot about their hardcore fan base. And a lot of people left the sport. A lot of fans left the sport because they felt like NASCAR sort of lost their way and looked unrecognizable in a lot of ways. I think Formula One is very close to sort of doing that. And this is like, this is an opinion I'm agreeing with from Breakard. At first I was kind of like, I liked the idea of Miami and Las Vegas, but as I've gotten more into the sport and I like watching the races and appreciating the subtle nuances of the racing, the less I'm into the bells and whistles that come with a glitzy race like Miami and Las Vegas. Like, if you were to ask me, if you could go to any race in North America, I would probably pick Canada.
That's a classic. It's a classic track.
But it's not just that. I feel like there'd be, for lack of a better term, less bullshit there than any of the other tracks. Like, you go to Miami and Las Vegas, and to a lesser degree COTA, there's going to be so many celebrities there, so many distractions. You go to Montreal, it, for the most part, is going to be just about the race.
Yes.
And that's the experience I want.
I agree, because I think they're trying to do things because I'm trying... I said, the purest, the hardcore trash opinion, because I think that it's a time of change and we all need to accept change. But there is a hard line, and Canada's one of those lines. Spa is one of those lines. Silverstone has gone back and forth, but I think they found their foothold in the sport. There's areas within Formula One where I think that we need to honor what it means to just look at a corner. Because for some people, like myself included, I was supposed to go to Canada. The dog got sick, couldn't go, but I was.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your dog. How's your dog doing?
He's better, 100% better. Come
Awesome.
Come after race day, he was just looking at me like, "Can we go run now? Can we go run?" Like, "Yeah, buddy, you're feeling better. Let's go." But I was
Awesome.
joking with Mike the whole time, like, I'm gonna be taking back a piece of the Wall of Champions with me. Like, all I wanted to do was just stare at that one area because it's just, that so many.
Is that where your seats were? Turn 8 and 9, you said?
Turn 8 and 9. So Wall of Champions is the final chicane, the exit of the final chicane.
Got it. Okay.
So, but no, turns 8 and 9. Yeah, that would have been cool to watch George smack against the newish Wall of Champions. But
yeah,
no, I agree. I agree with you that Miami was a bit much as far as trying to make it something that it's not. But I think also that I'm terrified of what's going to happen in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I just don't get me wrong. There's a lot of, and that's why I think I get so much like so many negative comments in my content. Like, I like all the other stuff that comes with racing. Like, I love watching the racing, but like, I love the cultural aspects of the sport as well. I love seeing like what the drivers are doing in off weeks. I love like seeing like who the drivers are dating. I love to see like what the drivers are wearing. Like, I love the awkward moments that happen on the track and off track.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that stuff is super, super fun to me. When I get turned off is when they're trying to make the sport something it's not. I thought the player intros in Miami were weird.
Very awkward.
The drivers hated them. Mm-hmm. I'm very interested to see what Las Vegas is going to be like. I think it'll be an interesting race to watch on TV. I don't know how good the fan experience is going to be for people who are actually there.
Given the promotion that I saw that they were doing, I'm not 100% certain about the fan experience too, because it just seems so blasé Americana. When you think of Vegas, it's playing cards and afros and Elvis. Like, no, I mean, I have friends that were stationed in Las Vegas, and they're like, it's actually kind of nice. When you're on Nellis Base, it's Nellis Air Force Base. It's like the showcase, one of the showcase bases for the Air Force. So it's like a pristine area within Vegas. And it's more than just that. And I hope that we're able to get an experience more than just Elvis and playing cards. Maybe Frank Sinatra. Throw Frank Sinatra in there because he kind of built that town.
They had the opportunity. Like, this was teed up for them to do an entire like Rat Pack vintage themed marketing campaign. Mm-hmm. But instead, and I said this in a different video, I don't know if you watch reality TV, but my wife Jenny and I watch Below Deck.
We're on season 4. We're on the sailing yacht. Yes.
Okay. So like a charter guest will say they want a casino night. And so the people who work on the charter, the interior will have to go into these tubs and pull out like streamers and sparkly jackets and like really bad poker chipsets and things like that. That looks like Party City. You decorated like the sky deck with Party City Vegas theme stuff. That's what the marketing campaign feels like. It was like, it feels like they're like, oh gosh, we got to do a marketing campaign in 30 minutes. Get in the car. We're driving to Spirit Halloween and we're going to buy whatever Vegas themed shit we can find.
I'm so happy you're on the show. I never thought of any of this. Oh, that is exactly. We got to go to Party City and get our shit together.
But like they had the opportunity to do this incredible, like styled vintage Rat Pack. Like everything could have been like 60s Vegas and would have been so cool and beautiful. And instead we got this.
No, that's definitely a missed opportunity. And with missed opportunities like this, with Stefano and the direction that Formula One's going, because he's obviously trying things out. He's talking about 24 races, and he was trying to do, the American.
Too many.
Thank you. What do you think about that? What would be your season?
You look at the history of Formula One, you look at in the 70s and 80s, like there were like 12 races, 13 races, 15 races. Like, I don't know. I think maybe 18 tops.
Ice.
Like 20. 23 is too many. It's too much for the teams. It's too much for the drivers. Like, I worry about the sustainability of the people that have to put on these races weekend in, weekend out, you know?
It's the mechanics that I worry about as well, because the drivers, yes, you know, they're going to have stress, but they're getting paid millions of dollars to drive a Formula One car. So I can't feel too sorry for them, but it's the mechanics that are doing the 12-hour plus shifts for, I mean, if you got July, we have 4 races in a row, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is a bit much for everybody. And I agree too with the sustainability. Like there's gotta be, I've said 18, by the way, on the show for how many races.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Love that.
I think so.
Yeah. I think 18, I don't know why it's like an arbitrary number. I think I'm trying to find a happy medium between what they currently have and what used to be the norm. But 23 is too many. Adding sprints on top of that is too much.
Preach about sprints, please. What do you think about the sprints, please?
So I had this conversation on Dirty Side of the Track with Brian and Rob, another podcast. And we came to the same conclusion independently that, like, if they are going to keep sprints, it should be totally separate from the drivers and constructors champion. Like, it should be like its own. If they absolutely have to keep sprint races for whatever reason, make it its own sprint championship standings. Like, and you could treat it like in European football or like British English football when they have like the EFL, the League Cup or the FA Cup, and it's sort of like it's treated like a separate league, and that could be a great opportunity to have reserve drivers get to race. Or test drivers or reserve drivers get to race. And so, especially if you have like a new talent who you feel like might not be ready to like have a seat, but you want to get them like some reps in and get to a feel for what it's like. I still think it'd be like very, very exciting. Like let's say this year that was the case in F1. I would love to see Mick Schumacher get to drive a Mercedes without the pressure that he had the first year at Haas, being Michael Schumacher's son. You know what I mean? So I think having like a separate sprint championship, so like the number one drivers on teams can elect not to do it if they don't want to, and it can give reserve drivers an opportunity to get some experience.
I think that's great. One thing Mike, he brought up on the show was reverse grid. The only time you do a reverse grid, so you have your normal quali and your normal qualies for the race day, but it's reverse grid on sprint race. What would you think of that? So having Logan Sargent potentially get a P, hopefully 6, something like that.
I mean, I think it'd be interesting. I think I like the idea of reverse grid. It's interesting, but I'm also hesitant to reward anybody for not performing. You know what I mean?
Because I get nervous about the participation trophy aspect of things. Yeah. And this is, as matter, you know, if you want to say these teammates are best friends, if it comes down to it, the guy's like, if I got to win this race to stay on the team, then I'm going to beat my teammate no matter what. And I think that would, I don't want that to go away from the sport at all.
Yeah. But as a whole, I think the sprint races, listen, I made a video about this and I compared it to, sprint races are like if you had just had dinner and then you're offered like trays of free catering and you're like, I'm full, like, but this is free food, so I'm going to eat it. Like, I know I don't need it, but I'm going to eat this tray of like room temperature Chipotle burritos that have been sitting out for 6 hours. Cause like, when's the next time I'm going to eat 10 free burritos in one sitting?
You're going to eat it. Like, you're going to.
Yes. So that's how I felt like about sprint races. Like we have the practice sessions, we have the quali, we have the Grand Prix coming up the next day, but we're still going to watch the sprint race, even though we're not that into it. And so like, I just don't think they should have them. I feel like it's about money. It's about getting more people to watch another day of racing during that weekend. Also being able to charge maybe a little bit more money than you would charge for like a day of quali.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I think they should just get rid of sprint races. I think it's too much for everyone.
So are you with Austria coming up? How do you feel about Austria? And then how do you feel about the sprint race in Austria? Because it's still ongoing. And I agree that if they're going to keep them, it's either change the whole format completely or remove them. But with this weekend, with this track, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings?
Well, I think it's interesting because half of this track looks like a NASCAR track, right?
Yeah. The first, honestly, 1, 2, 3 corners. Half of it is.
Looking at
sector 1.
Yeah. Sector. Sector 1 into sector 3. No. Sector 3 into sector 1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've never seen the Austrian Grand Prix. So like, I don't have a take on that. I do think that I don't think we're going to see any surprises unless there's rain.
Yeah.
But, I think, I think Max Verstappen in Austria is going to be like The Sound of Music and make a Von Trappen and say, so long, farewell, off Vader saying goodbye.
And just boom.
It's halfway through, and I just slapped Nick de Vries. Anyway, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I've once again never made that connection.
Yeah. So long, farewell, Vader saying goodbye. I hope to stay and drink my. I don't know how many wins is this will be his 42nd win.
It feels like 1,000th.
I hope to stay and drink my 1,000th champagne. Yes. Yes. Sorry, that was one of my favorite movies as a kid. So whenever I think of Austria, I think of The Sound of Music. I also think my wife calls Austria Diet Germany, and that feels right.
It is Diet Germany.
Yeah.
James,
it's like, I'm sorry. What do you think? I know you're going to talk about this in another episode, but what do you think is going to happen? I think we're going to see Max go 1. I think we're going to see like Alonso on the podium. I don't know whether there's going to be 2 or 3. And then maybe we'll see Lewis. Maybe we'll see a surprise from one of the Ferrari boys or something like that. But like, I don't think we're going to see
something too spectacular. It's weird. Austria, for some reason, I don't care for the track, but it always produces something amazing. That's okay. It's gonna be a solid race. I'm upset that there's a sprint race because I don't want to eat 10 Chipotle burritos that have been sitting out for 6 hours, but I'm still, but I'm going to. And gosh, it's a good time. I don't know why I don't like it, because it's always a good time. Maybe because it's just such a short track.
Yeah, I would love to see Checo get back in his groove. I feel I feel bad for him right now. I also one thing I do not like about Formula One fans, and I feel like this is across the board, what a short memory Formula One fans have. A month ago, 6 weeks ago, we were talking about that Checo might be a contender for the title. And now as fans, we're talking about whether he deserves a seat. And he is still second in the standings. And I know everyone said it's about context. It's about the fact that he's in the fastest car and he should be performing better. But like the amount of pressure that he is probably happening both externally and internally with him, I cannot imagine.
The Red Bull seat has historically been the hardest seat. I mean, with Pierre and Alex, and when you have someone as experienced as Checo struggling, there's strong indicators, in my opinion, that, I mean, obviously it's a Max-centric team. There's no doubt they're paying the kid over $40 million to drive. but the way the vehicle is tuned is every single year it's to Max's liking, and the other person has to adapt. So that, my friend, with how the winds change abruptly is, I mean, that's Formula One in its finest. Really.
But let's even talk about the last two races. Like, I don't, and I could be wrong, I don't think Checo has a problem in races. I don't think he's struggling in races. I think he's struggling in qualifying. Like, you look at the places he's gained, with the exception of Monaco, and he just had bad luck after bad luck in Monaco. Like, in Spain, he gained how many places to get to fourth place? I think
like 8,
he started
7, 8, something like that.
And he gained 6 places, I think, in Canada or something like that, or even more than that. But like, in the race, he does great, in my opinion. I know he, like a lot of people say, in the Red Bull, he should have been able to catch up with the 2 Ferrari cars, and didn't. But like, I think, he doesn't have an issue in the Grand Prix. It's something's going on in quali, and I don't know if it's mental or bad luck. I know like the quali in Canada was tricky with the rain, and some people timed it just right, where it was dry for like a lap or two, and they were able to put on slicks and get a really fast lap in, and some people weren't able to do that. But I don't think he has a racing problem. I think he has a quality problem.
I think he has a Max Verstappen problem. If Max wasn't able to cut through, and what do you do at Miami? Win in Miami, coming from 10th or 12th, like outside of the points.
Yep. I think he started at 9.
9? Okay.
I think so. I could be wrong, but I think he started at 9 in Miami.
I think that's his first main problem. And that's why everyone's saying, oh, he should have gotten by the Ferraris. It's because we know that car can. And when you have the pressure of qualifying in a car that you're clearly not comfortable with, let's reference Daniel Ricciardo. Oscar Piastri is adapting that car better than Danny. And everybody knows Danny is a fantastic driver, winner, qualifier, and everything, but it just wasn't clicking. And I think we're seeing, as you're saying, the unclickability, the non-clicking, if that's even a word, of Checo in that Red Bull during qualifying, because that's lowest fuel, maximum speed. And I know from, I just read something from Alex Albon. He said, when you drive a car that's built around Max Verstappen, he says, if you're playing Call of Duty, turn the sensitivity to the highest level that you can, and then take a corner at 180 miles an hour.
Wow.
So I think that's where you're correct in the qualifying aspect, because he said, if you just like rested your finger on it, the car would turn just like instantly.
Wow.
So that's very insightful. I never thought of him having an all-around issue, not a qualifying issue.
I don't know. I mean, that's just my take. I mean, like, everybody has an opinion, but like, that's sort of like what I'm seeing. I'm not, and I could be totally wrong.
No, I think you're onto something.
And I'm still trying to learn the sport, but that's sort of the way I've seen it.
No, that's very insightful. And I like how, because, what I've loved about our conversation so far is that I knew coming into this, I'm in a box. My brain has been in a box, and that's why I've been so excited, because watching your videos, it's like, I never even thought of this. I didn't even think about Formula One and the way that you do. And just when you bring in perspectives like you have, I was on the crew of just like, well, look what Max Verstappen's doing. Checo's not doing it. He's got to get out of that seat. But you were able to pick apart just like all the BS and say, no, actually, I think it's this.
Maybe. I don't know.
No,
we'll see.
I agree.
But I also agree that, like, I was listening to P1 with Matt and Tommy, and they were talking about how that second Red Bull seat is a poison chalice. Yeah. And many have struggled to have success there as the number 2 or beta to Max.
James, I hate to say what I'm about to say, but that's time.
All right.
That's all the time we have.
An hour. I love that.
I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to talk Formula One with me. I had a blast. I laughed most, I think, that talked. And before we sign off, where can the fans of ATO find your content?
Sure. They can find me on TikTok or Instagram at this James Coker, not that James Coker, at this James Coker. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I hope you have a good night.
You too.
And I hope we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Bye, guys. Once again, thank you for listening to our interview with James Coker. If you have the time, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other platform you listen on. You can also DM us on social media. We would love to hear your thoughts on the show and any suggestions you may have for future episodes. We are always looking to improve our show to provide you with the best Formula One content possible. Dankeschön, merci, gracias, obrigado, cheers, and thank you for your continued support. Till later.